Hello and welcome to the Uneducated Rugby podcast. This is a segment we're going to call Chasing the Egg, where we're going to talk about women's rugby. Myself, Lucy Jones, and we're delighted to be joined by Lisa Newton, former Wales international and current head of rugby at Cardiff Met and head coach at Pontyclun Falcons. It's brilliant to have you on. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks for having me. I love the opportunity to talk rugby, so it's great.
Yeah, first of all, how are you? But second of all, I think you're probably cock a hoop after the weekend. I saw Pontyclun got a good victory away from home.
Yes, we did. That was a tough old journey up to Carnarvon. We haven't had to do it for a few years now, so it's a long old journey. But for the team performance that was put in, I think what a great day for us, and a great bus journey home, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I can imagine. One hell of a trek though, isn't it? Fair play. But I assume there may be a few celebrations, maybe a couple of beers opened on the way back, I assume.
Oh, that was the first question after we come off the pitch was, where's the nearest shop? Where can we buy some cans? I was like, that's enough.
Yeah, we thought we'd go back to the beginning then. And just, simple question then. What inspired you to get into rugby? And can you remember your earliest rugby memory?
Listen, my old man's not going to be too happy about me telling this story, but basically I was a footballer, and I got pulled into sort of like academy stuff quite young, and I was maybe 11, 12 or something, and it was really intense, and all my friends were having fun, and there I was in these camps keeping food diaries and things, and it was just a bit much. I said, "Oh, Dad, look," and I mean, to be fair to him, he carted me up and down the country to all these games, and I said, "Dad, look, I don't want to play football anymore. It's too much. I want to be a 12, 13-year-old. I want to spend time with my friends." And he was like, "Oh, right, okay, fine, fair enough, that's it." And then the next week I took up rugby, and he ended up carting me up and down the country with rugby anyway. I mean, so that was my first memory, is that football sort of got a bit intense, and then picked up rugby, and very quickly that became quite intense as well. But for me, the culture and the environment around the team setting for rugby was a lot different to football, and it suited me as an individual a lot better. So yeah, that was probably my earliest. It was my maths teacher, Mrs. Ganner, who created a school team, and off the back of that then fed into district and whatever. So yeah, it was good. That was my first memory.
Oh, brilliant. That must have been quite early then, because school girls teams in schools weren't that regular back then.
No, not at all. I mean, I think we were probably one of the first teams that was pulled together, and I think it was purely off the back of like I mentioned, my maths teacher. So she played for a team, which she then was like, "Oh well, I might as well start up a team in the school I'm teaching in," and then we fed into another team. So it was, it was awesome of her, looking back, and what she did for grassroots. And then when she ended up getting a new job away from where we were, and then my dad took over coaching there because it was one of those things where it was like, it's either that or there's no team. And obviously I was really passionate about it from the moment I sort of got involved. So for him then, you've gone from carting me up and down the country with the football, which he didn't necessarily have any responsibility to then carting a minibus full of girls around the country. So, I mean, I don't think he was too pleased about that, with singing silly songs, and there he is driving at the front.
Oh, it must be a bit of a change. Do you have another question on that as well, Luce?
Yeah. So you obviously studied for school then. Was it Bryn Teg you went to?
Yeah.
I thought so. So, what was the first club you joined?
So it was Bridgend. I don't know if we were Bridgend Athletic. I don't think we had a second name, although the Bridgend Athletic was the club house, I guess. But that was at the time it was under 13s and under 16s, and then from there we ended up playing district, and district was we were sent west, so we linked up with Morrison and Gosainen, that sort of area, and then I became West Wales, so we had North Wales, East Wales and West Wales were the three sort of regions back in the day. And then after under 16 at that time, there wasn't much offering for rugby. So we tried to get an under 18s team, which we did have originally, but we had no one to play. So that was really tough time because there wasn't much rugby on offer. So at 16, then I ended up playing senior rugby, which is how I ended up with Pontyclun. One of my best friends was travelling down to T Cross to play, so I jumped in with her a few times because I couldn't drive at this point. So I went down there and had a few games for them, and we played Pontyclun, and I was like, why am I travelling an hour? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I got a club 20 minutes away, so I pulled a coach at the end of the game, and I was like, excuse me, I was all like shy and, you know, little scrawny little 16-year-old, and I was like, would you mind if I come and played with you? And they were like, well, you can't play for anyone else. And I was like, oh, I won't. Like, so yeah, I ended up moving to Pontyclun then. So I started playing senior rugby at 16, and I loved it. They proper looked after me, and again, it was that culture and that, like, that you couldn't beat it. So, yeah.
I'm an Ammerford gal, so.
T Cross was brilliant, but I couldn't train with them because it was too far. It was on a school night, wasn't able to get down there. But Sean looked after us youngsters like so well down there. It was brilliant, but it was just too much. I couldn't commit to travelling down there.
No. So it's interesting though you say that. I was wondering then, did you win that game against Pontyclun or did you lose? You did win. Okay. I was wondering if you'd gone sort of the grass is greener on the other side sort of approach.
It wasn't that at all. I don't think that, which is why I think the coach was like, what is this little kid doing? Like, running at the end.
It was quite a change though, wasn't it? From that, and then you also went to UWIC, and then you went into international setup.
Yeah.
And when was your first cap was away? Sorry, your first cap was home against Sweden in 2009. You came off the bench. What sort of experience was that, and what were your emotions? Do you remember?
Do you know what? Is it down in St Helens? It was, and I mean, I didn't get many minutes in that game. Right, let's be honest here. It was a couple of minutes at the end, which I guess maybe was a bit of like a token cap on. But I say a token cap, I don't mean it in that way. But it was. The World Cup was the following year, and this squad had been selected with the view that, okay, potentially anyone from this squad could be going to it, so we need these people to be prepared, or these players to be prepared. And I think that's more where that cap came from, because I guess that was our that was our autumn internationals type thing. I only remember the one, but yeah, so I think it was more about the experience and making sure that girls were comfortable in that environment, that if there was a call up that was probably a bit of a shock because of an injury or whatever, that we were prepared to fulfill that role and be part of that environment. Yeah.
And you mentioned Eleanor Snowsill had a debut cap, and who else had their first cap that day?
It was a girl called Becky Newton, who I'm not sure how many caps she ended up having, but she still plays now down in Llandaff North, and she's still a brilliant rugby player. So fair play. She lasted a lot longer than I did.
Yeah, it's amazing to think how long, some of these players, you mentioned a year later, I think you were probably playing with Sinead Harries, am I right? And was around, or either at the World Cup, or was it possibly just after the World Cup she would have come into the side?
No, she was pulled in for the World Cup. She was there. So there was Sean Ned, Vicky Owens, Lowry, and Adi Taverner, who Shona Powell-Hughes as well. So I think there's probably a few more in there that I'm forgetting as well. So sorry if anyone's listening. But I think that they were pulled up off the back of their under-20 campaign to train during 2010. And I mean, they were fantastic rugby players, all of them, in their own right. So, yeah, I think they very quickly got to show their skill set and what they could give to the team. So, yeah, they put themselves in contention for that World Cup, really put their hands up and, managed to get game time in it as well.
Yeah, it must have been an amazing sort of whirlwind experience for you. You mentioned, you sort of called it a token cap yourself there in 2009, but you then mentioned how you went to that Six Nations, obviously the following year, then you went to the World Cup. How big was that for you? You know, how big an experience, because you'd have been still studying at the time as well.
Yeah, do you know what? It was it was a really strange experience. So obviously, like, I was studying at Met at UWIC, and where I was quite like a senior, and then for 4 days a week I'd have to go and be the young pup, like in the sort of international environment, which was it was just a weird like a dynamic that you had to sort of fit but wear both hats, but in different ways.
Yeah.
So it was definitely an experience, but I think like how quickly my time increased, or my game time increased come to World Cup was pretty sharp. Like, so in that Six Nations, I mean, there was 2 games that I started and finished on the bench for Wales. So, I was under no impressions that, I was sort of like for a better phrase, big fish. I guess it was still good to be in that environment, because then in the World Cup there was a couple of injuries and I ended up getting a lot more game time than I had in the sort of previous campaigns or previous competitions. Sorry. So it was a bit of a shock to the system, but I absolutely loved it. I mean, I got to play a full game against New Zealand, I think, that was actually my first full game for Wales, was against New Zealand. And don't get me wrong, it was a tough old game, but it was, again, the experience of like the haka, and do you know what I mean, like all of the game day stuff that came along with it. And I got the opportunity to play against teams that a lot of people in the Northern Hemisphere don't get to play against on a regular basis. So we had I think they called it like the pool of death or something. It was like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. There was the pool rounds, and I was like, oh wow, like you don't get that experience very often as a rugby player, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think you lost to South Africa, didn't you, in the pool stages, and then beat them in the plate in the back when it was a plate competition. It's quite a weird concept of seeing a plate in a World Cup. Do you like that setup, or do you prefer the setup that's going to be this year of a sort of a straightforward single competition?
That's a strange one, because now with my coaching hat on, the more rugby the better, right? So yeah. The more opportunity to play, then the better players become, or the better the squad becomes. So for me, yes, I think that people should play on through to get to the 4th, 5th, whatever playoffs, and to be seeded, to say you had a definitive where you placed.
Yeah.
However, with the competition becoming a bit bigger and the amount of games that are happening, I don't know whether I would feel the same if I was in charge of a group of players in that environment. Although, saying that, they have committed to longer spaces within the game in this tournament. So yes, there is an opportunity for adequate rest and recovery.
I was going to say, I think it was 4 days between each game with you girls, so I don't know how you managed that at all.
Yeah, it's tough.
I used to be peeling myself off the carpet after school rugby, let alone international level.
Against the group you had as well.
Yeah, that must have been horrendous. I can't imagine. Luce, I think you wanted to move it on to
yes. So after the World Cup, you played in the Six Nations in 2012, and you played in every game, right? In 2012.
So the game I missed was I actually had a concussion. I definitely missed one of them. I think it was Scotland away that I missed.
Right, okay.
But yeah, I played in all the others, which was grand. I think is 2012 the year with the game got called off against Ireland.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, so that I was due to be in that, or I wasn't due to be in the Irish game, but I think it got called off at halftime because the pitch froze over. Yeah, I mean, that's brutal. And then I think it was 3 weeks later, one of our players got cited and received a ban, so I got pulled I was supposed to be on the bench and I got pulled in to start. So yeah, it was only the Scottish game that I missed in that campaign. So yeah, it was a good one. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
You touched on something you mentioned to us beforehand that I must admit I didn't know before we came on, which was that unfortunately you had to end your career due to concussion. Do you want to just touch on that, what that experience was for you, and sort of how did you find out that you can continue?
So I guess like many rugby players, we don't like to be injured and we don't like to miss playing. It's quite a difficult thing when it's such a big part of your identity and who you are. And when it's an injury that people can't see, there's a lot of external pressure that comes with it as well. So people, it's not like you got your arm in a cast. People can obviously see that but when it comes to your head, it's difficult because all these, things are happening internally that you can't necessarily express, like, the mental health issues that come along with it. So I had, I can't even remember how many times I've been knocked out, which is terrible to actually say out loud. But it was, I guess, 2015. I'd been out in Canada a few years and I was playing for a team out there. And we'd got knocked out in the semi-final of the Cup, and we were going to watch the Cup day. The setup that they had there was like a big complex of like, I don't know, 6 or 7 fields. So there's a lot of rugby happening. So we went up to watch the final and obviously went to the bar. And the bar, we had to walk past another field. And this guy put an absolute shot in on someone, and it was a great tackle. They both got up after it, but the guy who'd made the tackle, he took about 3 or 4 steps and just collapsed. Basically, for whatever reason, his head had shut his body down, and it was crazy. Everyone was shouting for a doctor. They have to get an AED. He survived. This sounds awful, right? Like he survived. But he was put into a coma for 9 days, and within the rugby community, there was a lot of awareness raising and stuff like that. And it was a concussion that or the head trauma that caused it. And sometimes I have to ask yourself, like, what am I doing? Like, I wasn't a professional rugby player. I wasn't making money from it. I mean, like, I was working construction, which is like a physically demanding job, and I think that it wasn't something that necessarily happened to me that really said enough was enough. It was like watching this guy, having people work on him with, on the AED machine going, and it was a bit of a like, a bit time to grow up now, Lisa. You need to look after yourself. You want a long life and to enjoy it. You're not gonna be able to do that if you are in this, putting yourself in this position sort of continually.
Yeah. It's sort of moment of truth, really, isn't it? That when you see something and the risk that it can be. We talk a lot about it now, but you were talking back in 2015. You were saying then, and it's probably just before it really became the big thing it has become in rugby.
I think to be fair, in North America, they like America, Canada, with the stuff with the NFL and stuff, I think they are more aware, and I think they are ahead when it comes to how to deal with it. I mean, not to generalize, but in the UK, we tend to be like, I'm fine, dust it off, jog it off, I'm fine. And that's not, that's not something you can do with a concussion. And unless you're educated about that and the people around you are educated about that, it's really tough to be in those situations where people are going, oh, you'll be all right. Oh, go on, you'll be all right. And then, like, again, challenging with that your identity and your mental health is like, could I be all right? Should I just do it? And it can have a really like hard effect on you,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Completely.
That's really eye-opening.
Yeah.
That really is.
We weren't aware of that before we invited you on,
No.
so it's really fascinating to have that discussion, because I think we had a follow-up question was something to do with coaching, wasn't it?
Yeah. So obviously you went to Canada. So you played out there, but did you expect to coach out there as well?
I think so. I studied sports coaching at UWIC, so it was something that interested me, and I guess I've got my coach at UWIC, Kylie Wilson, who is fantastic. You know, I did a couple of placements, because I had to do placement hours. So I did a couple of placement hours with her, and she said, actually, you're quite good at this. You should think about it. And I thought, yeah, I could do this. And I guess for me, like, again, going back to like having an identity as a rugby player or rugby, you know, community member, if I had to quit as a player and completely step away, I'm not sure how that would have affected me. But because I'd started coaching a little bit, and I had this, you know, passion for it, I quite enjoyed it, and I was all right at it. So for me, it was a natural progression, a natural pathway.
Yeah.
Which I loved, and it wasn't expected. I basically, so in 2011, me and my best friend Vic, we went out there and we went traveling for like 3.5 months, and we basically, before we left, we were like, how are we going to make friends, because we can't be just roaming around the city in Toronto by ourselves. So we emailed a couple of rugby teams, and one of the teams got back to us, and they were super helpful with like helping us navigate the city and understand where we were, which was great. So we showed up to them, and they were brilliant with us. That one of the coaches at the time was married to a Welsh guy, and so we became like their adopted family, which it was so nice. And then one of the girls who played for the team was a student and said, "Oh, my coach asked me to ask about you. Do you want to do some coaching?" And I was like, "Yes, like let's do it." So that's how I ended up with the University of Toronto then.
That's class. So how was that experience? Like, could you see a contrast between coaching in Canada and, well, now back in Wales? Is there a big contrast, or is it quite similar in ways?
I think it's quite a big contrast. To be fair, Wales and the UK, we're brought up seeing rugby, and I don't, like, you know, I can't speak for everyone, but I used to go and watch the Bridgend Ravens every Saturday with my uncle. I was a season ticket holder, and you know, that was just part of life. So seeing it, being around it, and like the feel of the community. Out in Canada, in the club rugby, it was like very community orientated, but a lot of young players didn't watch much rugby.
Yeah.
So for me, going out there with, you know, I assumed a certain level of knowledge that didn't exist. They hadn't seen it. They couldn't understand how I was asking them to do things. Or so a lot of my coaching was like, make sure you do your homework and watch a game this weekend, like, you know, just so you can understand more about it. Because I guess, like, and I like to think, you know, especially in Wales, we do have a relatively high rugby IQ from how much rugby we're around and we're exposed to. But for Canada,
that's the basis of this podcast, I think, is an IQ that we think we've got.
I guess in Canada, there was like the contrast that I had these absolute specimens of athletes who were like, I mean, there was something in the water out there. I'd go into the team huddles, they'd all be towering over me and be like, right, today. And it was, you know, but again, it was that exposure to more rugby. But in terms of the athleticism they had and the skills they had, they were great. But putting them together in more of a system or helping them see more than just the current was quite difficult. It was, but a great challenge for me as a coach, because it actually taught me, you know, don't assume anything.
No, it's exactly what you want, isn't it? You've got these specimens and you can sort of, you know, for want of a better phrase, mold them in your image, really, however you want it to be, and it was perfect for you.
Okay, and what was your main takeaway then from the whole experience?
Oh, I mean, that depended on what level. So I coached the university level, and I also coached the provincial team as well. So I'm part of the coaching staff in the provincial team. So there was a pretty big contrast between the girls who were like just taking up rugby at sort of like 18, 19, and then the sort of players who'd been playing for a considerable amount of time and had exposure to a certain level of coaching. I think, like, you know, that the group of girls that you know I was coaching at Ontario were like the likes of Laura Russell, who has gone on to have like how many 50 odd caps now, I think. You know, a high quality of players, and some of the girls I played against in the 2010 World Cup were in that squad that I was now coaching. And I don't know, it was just, it's just so, it's different out there. It's different how they play and how they approach the game. Fitness is a big deal for them. And like I said, the athleticism of the girls there is class. I think they could probably start watching rugby younger. Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned fitness. Obviously, that was quite key when Wales played Canada this autumn. You saw probably a difference in fitness there. Really, you saw Canada grow in the game and be stronger, even despite being down to 14 at the end of the game. But it's fascinating to think that then you went off to Canada, then you came back to Cardiff Met, your alma mater. Well, Cardiff Met, it was UWIC, obviously, back in the day. And, you know, I'm just looking at it from this season. I can see Cardiff Met finished the league second. Is that correct? Or are there playoffs? I'm not 100% sure.
We didn't have a very successful season this season, I'll be honest. It's been a tough. COVID has had a big impact on, I think, clubs in Wales, and being a sort of like standalone university club where we're not linked to a Premiership team. That's had an impact on us because there have been girls, and the RFU were. I mean, I feel like I'm bouncing around on this question, so bear with me here.
No,
the RFU sort of started to release the guidelines, or to relax, the guidelines a lot quicker than the WRU did. So for us, I think there was 5 weeks before our first game where we'd done no contact for 2 years, or coming up to 2 years. So it was really like quite tough for us to be able to adjust to that, whereas the RFU would release the sort of like community rugby level stuff. They'd allowed contact to come into that, you know, a lot sooner. So again, we were also under sort of restrictions with usually sort of like pre-season girls will invite freshers in and stay with the senior girls. That couldn't happen because of COVID. They couldn't move into their dorms or whatever early either. So we were sort of stuck with a very short timeline, and I've spent a lot of the season firefighting, which, you know, as I guess maybe lit a match at my backside to try to, like, you know, make this season, you know, the season that we should be having. So we didn't get relegated. Someone else got relegated, which was great, and we made the quarters, which is, you know, a start. But for me, I've got ambitions to finish top 3 in that, and to be playing in that semi-final. So hopefully maybe we'll come back to this in a year and I'll be able to tell you, actually, yeah, we're going to final tomorrow, or actually tonight.
I must have misread that then. I saw something that said that you were second behind Exeter. Was that last season, or was that?
Oh, so that would have been pre-COVID, that.
Okay, because there were 10. Yeah. I saw 10 games you'd played, but you'd played Swansea 3 times or something. Maybe I've just. This was the numbers that I read on the Bucks website, so I'm not going to say this.
Right. Okay, moving on then. Okay, this is an interesting question. Have you noticed like any impacts from all the recent developments in Welsh rugby? So, for instance, the professional contracts, the performances from the Welsh women at the TikTok Six Nations. Are the girls inspired by all of this? Like, are they attracted to new role models now? Has there been an impact of any sort?
I think, okay, so there's a couple of layers here. So I was involved in the Ospreys under-18s regional stuff that was part of the selection process for the under-18s tournament that finished today. So the buzz around those girls, knowing that they could actually stand there and say, I want to be a professional rugby player, for them, huge, massive, that as now they want that as a career path, not just as a, you know, I'll do that while I teach, or I'll do that while at whatever job it is they're doing, right? So that was a huge impact. But one of the biggest things I found is that people who knew very little about women's rugby before, and now we're now having conversations about, oh, what do you think of that then? And I'm like, oh, you watched it, did you? Like, because the exposure's there, so all of a sudden these conversations are happening with people who aren't necessarily fans of, or weren't fans of women's rugby before this, but there's been so much exposure, and like, fair play to the social media platforms that have been created off it as well, because there's some class content in there. I love Stella Mills. I think she's hilarious. You know, I think that she's, you know, her journey into becoming a content creator. I'm really sorry, I'm not entirely sure what her official title is, but I think the impact that that's had, and I now see girls in Met who are part of like the media courses or broadcasting, and they're like looking at this as in, yes, I want to be, you know, I want women's rugby to be my priority, and it can be for the first time in, I mean, maybe forever, is that, I don't know if that's fair to say, but you know, there's so much opportunity now, and I think the exposure is it, you can't fault it. I mean, you know, there was a lot of criticism on there last year, the year before, when they were playing a 12-year-old episode of Flog It or whatever instead of the Red Roses game, and you're like, come on, man, surely people are going to enjoy that more. And I think that this standalone campaign has actually proved that. And I think the branding or the sponsorship from TikTok, I think that's massive. It's targeting, you know, a generation that will change women's rugby for so much, and for the better in the long run as well. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, there's all sorts going on now, and like Lucy and I were massively inspired by the No Woman No Try documentary on Amazon Prime. It's a phenomenal documentary. I think we plugged it before the pod, but definitely watch it, everything if you have seen it, because for me personally, as you mentioned, there were several people who probably didn't talk a lot about women's rugby. I was one of them, and for, you know, I don't know if that's for my sins or whatever, but I'm now trying to be more involved, talk about it as much as possible. I loved watching the Six Nations so far. It helps watching a Wales team that's successful, I'm not going to lie, but that is part and parcel of it. You watch what's being successful, and Wales are being successful, and I'm seeing, I love the sort of rugby Ireland play. I know they haven't had all the results, but I love the rugby they play and things like that. It's great to sort of advertise the women's game as much as possible. I didn't really have a question follow that. It's just something I was saying.
I guess so. Off the back of what you're saying there, that like with the Six Nations and like the difference that we're seeing, especially from the Welsh girls after the last campaign, which was, I mean, we'd all rather forget it, you know, than, you know, remember any of that. But where we've come to now, and I mean, these contracts have been in place for a very, very short amount of time. So whether we've seen the full impact of them or not, I mean, I'm not convinced. I think we've got a lot more growing to do, and I think that we will do that. Yeah. But off the back of this now, I think Italy announced today, they've just announced contracts for their girls. So actually the pressure is on now for, you know, bless the Irish girls, but they're not being very well supported. They've been through a lot of stuff in the past, you know, couple of years, and it's just been horrendous. It's like, you know, fighting for the bare minimum, and it feels awful, and it feels like there's you know, we're being kept down. I say we, you know, especially for them, they like being kept down. And I just think that this campaign and you know, like you mentioned, the No Woman No Try, and hopefully we'll see more stuff like that. I would love to see like you know, like the Lions tour videos. I'd love to see that of some of the teams going out into the World Cup, and just little snippets of what it's like to be a professional female rugby player. And I think that will again just have such a massive impact on young players. It's an exciting time for women's rugby.
No, I completely agree. There's so many, you know, I don't know if you could have a fly on the wall documentary on Amazon, you know, All or Nothing, whatever you want to call
it. Yeah, exactly.
There's a brilliant one which is Making Their Mark, which does Aussie rules, and what it does is it covers several different teams, and it also covers home life as well as team life. And I thought that would be perfect, having that balance, because obviously you've got professional players, you've got semi-professional, you've got amateur players all going to this World Cup and seeing how they juggle, like you juggled. You said you're labouring career and also playing on the side. But playing on the side, I don't know which was the priority to you.
Out of interest, had you been offered a professional contract whilst you were playing, would you have taken it? I know it's a tough question. There's a lot of thinking, I know.
I think for me, it would have depended on where I was in my career. I think up until probably 25, I lived my life like a nomad. Do you know what I mean? I didn't necessarily settle into anything or any one place. So at that point, yes, 100%. I think like if I was still physically fit and whatever, now it would probably be a really hard decision to make because, I've got a little girl. I work 2 sort of like part-time jobs, which is like one we met, and then one is like my day job or whatever. So I think that it would be difficult to let go of the comfort that I've become used to at this point in my life. But a younger me, 100%, I'd have jumped at that, and I would have absolutely loved it. I'd have been all over TikTok.
You like watching Seaweed Bloated, don't you, on TikTok?
Oh, she's class. Literally,
they're brilliant.
I know. I had to go on TikTok. I literally just follow the Welsh women.
Doesn't even follow me. I've got my own account.
You need to follow the Scottish girls as well, because they are actually like hilarious.
I follow Joanna Lloyd, and that's it at the moment. But yeah, I definitely will.
Yeah.
Just moving it. Sorry, we've got to move it forward, but yeah, moving it on to your playing days at UWIC. I noticed that quite a few of them were also playing for Wales. You had Rachel Poolman, Hannah Roberts, Amy Young, Kerry Redmond, Rhian Bowden, Marid Evans, but probably a plethora of others as well. But do you think that any of the current crop that you've seen and you're currently coaching now, do you think you can see a few of them appearing in the red shirt, or possibly the red roses, unfortunately, with the England selections?
Yeah, no, that's very fair. I think, listen, it's been a very difficult time for them. They basically went into lockdown at 16 and then came out playing their first game of senior women's rugby in the BUCS competition, which is a tough old competition full of athletes, right? So for these girls, I don't think, and for myself, I have to take sort of check myself here. Have I put them in the best position to show off the most of it? I'm not sure this year. I feel like it's been a firefighting year rather than a year of like true development. Yeah. So I don't think we've fully seen what this group of girls has got to give. But I think that this year, year's time, when you invite me back, I'll be like, actually, yes, here are the girls you need to watch out for. Bro. So they've got potential. I think that they haven't shown any of that potential just yet, but they will. I'm convinced they will.
Yeah, and I think with all the focus that has been on the men's Met team, with the likes of Alex Don Brandt and Luke Northmore playing for Eddie Jones' England, sadly. But you also got the likes of Roma Zheng's try in that brilliant, not his try, but the setup for the winning try against Cardiff Uni. Do you feel that has been on the men's side? Do you find there's not enough coming over to the women, or do you feel that it's gradually a balance?
No, I think if you look at the development that BUCS have put into the Super Rugby, I think that didn't happen overnight. But what I can tell you is that they are doing that with the women's. They are pushing for development, and we were supposed to have 2 live streams this year, but unfortunately one of them was we ended up having a walkover. So that there is an emphasis on live streaming and getting the content out there. I just don't think that this year has been like the best year for it. Like I said, one of them got cancelled, so I do think there is I don't think there's any inequality when it comes to that stuff. I think the men's program set up in Cardiff Met it's class. It's been run for a while. I mean, Danny Milton's a lot of us coaches look at it as like king, do you know what I mean? Because he's created such a special pathway that has taken time to grow. It didn't happen overnight, right? Like that took time to get to that point. And sometimes people will see all the success now and be like, oh yeah, Cardiff Met, but there was a lot of hard work that was put in by a lot of people and a lot of volunteers to get it to the point it is. I think that where the women are is we're probably a couple of steps behind that. We're not necessarily, I mean, I got put into post just before COVID, then COVID, and this has been my first year, which, I mean, it's not the favorite year as a coach, right? You don't want to be looking at those results and being like, that's my legacy. That's, you know, I want to do a lot more. So hopefully now this coming season, you'll see a change in that, and, you know, our ability to show young people, especially in Wales, what women's rugby can be. Because I think that, you know, where the WRU currently has gaps in performance pathway, I think that Cardiff Met can be a real filler for them. So.
Yeah, and I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago with Craig Manson about how important that a friend of the pods, and he was talking about how important the university system is in Scotland, and how in Wales it has been historically, like we mentioned, all those players. So it's important to keep that pathway going. Let's move to Pontyclun though, because you mentioned you had that victory on the weekend. I think your next game is on the 24th of April. Is that correct? I'm double checking all my facts now. Am I right in saying you're second in the table currently behind Nelson as well?
I don't think so after this weekend. So I couldn't tell you where we are. I want to say we're further down than second though.
Okay, but you're two from three, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we lost to Llandaff, which is a tough one. You know, I think we've played them 4 times this season and we both won 2 apiece, which is, you know, frustrating because we know that we're capable. It's just making sure that we show up on the day and who we are on the day and that everything else is right. So it's been a frustrating season, and, you know, I have to hold my hands up. I didn't read the handbook properly. So when we were going through the beginning of the season, I was rotating the squad, you know, like we've always done, to make sure everyone gets some good game time, and then we can start to refine as we go into the latter part of the season. Actually, those games were setting us up to go to cup final. So right. Yeah. So while we were going through that, we actually ended up missing a boat for the cup final, which has been, you know, a goal of mine since joining Pontyclun. I think we've been to the final. I mean, I've been there as a player, maybe like, I don't know, it's been 10 times, 11 times over the years, and we've never come away with the cup. It's frustrating. So
I can imagine.
Yeah. But we talked about how, next season, and then this season come, and I, as you know, like I said, got to hold my hands up to that. Probably didn't set us up for success in the best way, but again, I guess reading the rule book isn't necessarily my strong point as a flanker. That's not something I like to do. So,
Richie McCord did rule book today, so that's.
I think for us now and this season, our priority is, you know, making sure that we get that player base back that we had pre-COVID. We've had so many new players, and we really want to embed them into like our culture and who we are. We've had a new assistant coach join us, Joe, who's been fantastic. He's offered, you know, something different, and I think challenged my thought processes around coaching. And you know, I've been there for maybe 6 or 7 years now. So for me, it's easy to sort of get, well, this works, I'm not going to change it, but well, why not? Why aren't I pushing for more? So it's been great to have him come on board. We've got a great set of management, which makes a whole difference with the club if you've got management who can organize things for you, and you can just show up and coach and really get to the good stuff. So yeah, I think like our priority is embedding those players this season, but next season you watch out.
We will.
Yeah, we'll all be watching. Just you mentioned the player base. Do you want to? I think you train on. Is it Thursdays at 7 p.m? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So so we train Thursdays at 7. So we were training at Pant in the school, but we're now actually moving back to our clubhouse. So we'll be training on the main pitch from 7 till we lose light. We're always looking for new players, and it doesn't matter what experience you've got. We've got a range of players, and everyone's welcome.
Yeah, real range. I was looking at the player profiles. I think we've got students that are doing their A levels. You've got people that are firefighters in, I don't want to dig them out, but in their early 40s. You know, it's got a real range of ages and sort of I assume ability-wise as well. So, am I right in saying there's just one team or the two teams?
There is just one team, but I think off the growth that we've sort of gone through over the past season or so, and will probably continue to grow. Well, probably, I say hopefully continue to grow. Better way of putting it. We would like to make sure that we can offer additional games to girls who aren't as experienced. Because we understand how important that is. We're very blessed to have had, you know, a couple of under 18s that have come up to us. We help one of our Falcon players coaches the Rhinos under 18s. So a couple of them come and train with us, or stay on afterwards because they were training in the same place. So they come and join us. So we're aware that, you know, we want to do more as a club to you know, to keep building off the back of this success. You know, more people playing rugby, so let's give them the opportunities, because I don't think there are that many at this point, but we want to make sure that, you know, we're doing our part to make sure there are opportunities for people to get involved.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It sort of mirrors a quote that I read from yourself. I think you said that you wanted to be the part of the movement and empower people, not just on the rugby field, but in all aspects. Oh, that was a really great quote. Sorry to quote yourself at you, but it's a really great quote for any aspiring coach, really, that you want to do your part for the women that you're coaching first and foremost, but you want to do your part for them as human beings and for the world of rugby in general.
Listen, I'm a massive believer in empowering each other, and, you know, sport is just one way that women can do that for each other, and, you know, in those environments. And yeah, for me, I see a shift. I think, you know, if you look at social media, and especially, like, we take the example of the last Six Nations for Wales as an example, there was some really hard critical things that are being said of women without real understanding of where it comes from. And that's not going to change. So when we are creating safe spaces for people to sort of feel confident and empowered, and, you know, we want to make sure they feel supported in and outside of rugby. It doesn't just end there, right? We're a community, I think, or that's how I like to see it. So yeah, I think that's super important.
No, I completely agree. Luce, do you agree with that as well?
I believe we are too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions, Luce, before? I think I've got one more left.
Go for it then.
My final one was sort of more to do with, you mentioned it briefly earlier about the under 18s, and I think two Pontyclun youngsters with Molly Reardon and Maya Dixon, they were playing at half-backs for the under 18s, and they were victorious today to go 3 from 3. How exciting is that for you to watch those girls coming through, and hopefully then they'll join the seniors possibly? Is that the plan for them?
Yeah, so to be fair to them, they've been training with our seniors for a good few months now. They're very talented rugby players, and they've got very bright futures. And the fact that they've chosen to come into our environment is awesome. Like, for me as a coach, that they are choosing to come to us, great. To see them today just having fun and, you know, showing off and just like living their best lives, like, that's awesome. I love that. And I think I can't, you know, 100% say, but I think Molly might be committed to coming to Cardiff Met in September. So I mean, there's even more exciting times for her, and I want to continue to work with her because I think she's a cracking player. Maya, we haven't quite sold on Cardiff Met yet, but we're still trying.
Still time, definitely.
Yeah, is that a quiet little word you've been having at Pontyclun? I saw there was one of the other players, I can't remember her name, but in the player profile said that her rugby inspiration was yourself, and I wondered whether that was a suck-up move.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that one. Where's that hidden away?
I've written it down. I can't remember who it is now off the top of my head. Let me try and find it. Nina Moore, the second row.
I tell you what, right, I've got a lot of time for Nina. Let me tell you about Nina as a rugby player. She came to us from USW, who, you know, aren't necessarily known for their rugby program, but she came in as a youngster into the Falcons, and she has very quickly worked her way up to a you know, a sort of like not necessarily a leader in terms of the talking, but by how she leads by example. She's an aggressive rugby player, but also so like softly spoken when you speak to her, you know. So she like just, you know, a good team player, and you shouldn't undervalue those players in your team that, you know, bring a lot more than just the rugby. I think she's one of them. So although she might be sucking up with that one.
Well, you've obviously inspired her.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I was going to say one of the teacher's pets. Sort of, you hear about Sir Alex Ferguson have his teacher's pets that do round for tea. Is that something you do with the, you know?
That's right. They all have to put an apple in a bag on their way into training. That's it. A bribe for who starts the weekend.
Oh, brilliant. We'll finish off, I think, with a couple of quick fire questions, if that's okay. I've nicked a couple from your player profiles, actually, which is, first of all, what was your pre-match song of choice when you were a player?
It was Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, loved it. That was a bit of me. That was which. So they, I guess, back in when we were prepping for the World Cup, that was one of the things that they wanted. They wanted everyone to contribute towards a playlist that would be put on in the changing rooms. And Laurie Harris had, I think it was like Shirley Bassey and yeah. So it was, and it was all like random shuffle. So it was that. Then it was like, which was my song. I was like, this is not pumping me up for a game at all. I was like, I think we should all go back to our earpods and get in our own heads, because there's such a variety of music. It was like, what is happening?
Were you in charge of the Orcs? But no, clearly you just decided, no, we're not having an Orcs at all. We sort of touched on this, but who was your rugby inspiration growing up? Who was that first figure that went, I want to be like them?
I mean, my dad was a massive inspiration for me. He's always been massively into his sports, but he's always, you know, he's never let the fun go out of it for him. So that was a huge inspiration. But as I got older, then Kylie Wilson was someone who I still think back to now. It was like, what would Kylie do? You know, and I think that if you speak to any of the girls that were sort of like at UWIC at that time and under her leadership, I mean, we thought that the sun shone out of her backside, because she was awesome. She was tough on us when she needed to be, you know, and even when we didn't necessarily want to hear it, she made us work hard, but we reaped the benefits. I mean, I've got 4 BUCS medals, or 1 Busav, 3 BUCS medals from my time there. I think, you know, I don't think that would have happened had we not had her as a lead, you know, steering the ship for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, we had a very talented group of players, but that, you know, that doesn't make a team. So I think whatever she did to us in that time just changed the game.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Right, next question. What's your most memorable victory or game, firstly as a player and then as a coach?
So as a player, would have been my second cap. So it would have been the 2010 Six Nations. It was Valentine's Day. We were playing Scotland at home, and we were playing in the Brewery Field in Bridgend.
Yeah.
Home game.
So growing up in Bridgend, like that was, you know, quite a big deal. So like I had all my school friends, I had teachers there. My nan, bless her, who knew very little about rugby or really cared, was there. And she had a big balloon with a heart because it was Valentine's Day. I was like, oh, yeah. So I came on. I had maybe like, I don't know, 18, 19 minutes in this game, and the like stadium. I mean, they want the numbers that are there like at this campaign, but just went wild, and they saw me getting my warm-up stuff off, and my uncle, who was a massive wind-up, just kept calling me Duncan Jones. But yeah, there was a huge cheer, and then afterwards in the changing rooms, I remember Non Evans being like, oh, we were talking about, because we won that game, So we're talking about, yeah, like good stuff. And then Nonger turns around and goes, yeah, but the biggest cheer was when Lisa walked on the field. I was like, I'm quite chuffed, but also like a little bit embarrassed then. So yeah, as a player internationally, that was probably a big one. But as a player not internationally, I think the 2009 Bucks final, we played against Leeds Beckett. I think actually we played against Scars that year in Twickenham. So that was awesome, being surrounded by that group of players, and in that that university environment is very intense. You spend a lot of time together, and you just love each other, don't you? And winning together in that space was like, that's huge. So that one was also one as a player. But I won't go. That's it.
And then what about as a coach?
As a coach, as a coach.
Give a top 3 if you want.
Pick one. I guess I probably Swansea RFC. When I took over coaching Falcons, it was like my second season there, and we beat Swansea, who we hadn't beaten for the longest time. I mean, it was like years before, I think, the last time we beat them. And we beat Swansea, and then it sort of became we regularly beat them, like once or twice a season. And yeah, for me, that was a big turning point, because on that day, I felt like I'd achieved a very like team cohesiveness. And, there's no standout players. It wasn't about internationals or individuals. It was like everybody did their job, and it looked exactly how it should look. So, yeah.
Brilliant. What about, sorry, one sec, I will edit this. I double record just in case. And there's something else that only records in hours, which is frustrating beyond belief. What about, as a player then, was there the one player that you played against that you went, oh, this is too hard? Was it just the toughest opponent you ever faced?
Oof. I mean, for the longest time I played with it, but when we got split into regionals, we were all sent back to our birthplaces. So playing against Sioned was an absolute nightmare. Sioned Harris. I mean, I remember she was trying to put her hands on the ball, obviously, and I'd gone in to clear out, and it wasn't a clean clear out. It wasn't like I smashed her off it, but I did enough, and I grabbed her arm and I twisted it round just to get her away from the ball. And she sort of stood up and was like, pushed me, and was like, oh, Lisa, it's you. And I was like, what would you have done if it wasn't me? I mean, I wouldn't have liked to have been on the receiving end of where she's got to in her rugby career, because I think she's a brilliant nuisance, especially in terms of the back row. So yeah, I'd rather not play against Sioned.
It reminds me so much of a beautiful moment. I don't know if you watch much football, but in the Premier League recently, Christian Eriksen obviously had his heart attack last summer, and then he came back to play for Brentford, and he commits a foul on a player, Brandon Williams, and Brandon Williams gets up, goes to push him, and realizes it's Christian Eriksen, gives him a hug to apologise for going to have a go at him. So it's brilliant. It reminds me so much of that. Sorry, I just went off on a massive tangent. Luce.
I think we've got 2 questions left, I think, one each. I feel like we've already touched upon this. I feel like we've already got the answer, but if there's another answer, what is your favourite stadium you've ever played?
Oh,
is it Bridgend?
I mean, for me as an individual, that was class. But I actually love playing in Twickenham, which is probably not what a Welsh rugby player should say. But I mean, I think that for me, playing in Twickenham, those games were, although the crowd did not look very big, they actually were the biggest time. So I think there was one year with our Bucks final, and there was a load of kids there who decided instantly that they did not want us to win. They just booing us from the beginning, and I think that atmosphere and that was just cracking. But I also was the part of the first women's team to play in it was Millennium Stadium then. So, I mean, that for a Welsh rugby player, that's a big deal, right? So those two probably stick out for me in terms of. But again, I'm not sure whether that's the place or whether that's the what was created there. Like,
yeah, Lucy and I are music students, and my ambition when I was a little kid was always either to sing at the Millennium Stadium pitch or to play. I wasn't any good at rugby, so I quickly had to shout to the other option. Luckily, I have had the opportunity, although it was, sort of a half time just coming on sing a few songs, but it counts.
Listen,
it counts.
Dreams do come true, mate.
They do.
I've done Amsterdam's Park. That's the best I've done.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty. Did you see the crowds there from the Scottish? I mean, I'd have been intimidated to sing in front of that crowd. I'd have to take a few drinks to get in there.
Lucy's playing piano in the Arms Park every weekend, don't you?
Yeah. So for the Cardiff Rugby games, I play for the choir for those games.
That's class.
It's class. It is class. Yeah. We actually haven't played on the pitch yet because of COVID, but I think next game we're playing on the pitch. I can't sing at all, but I love it.
I
can't sing either. Don't worry.
Well, you know what? I've just had a thought off the back of what your question there. Sorry. My least favorite place to play, and I mean this in the nicest way, was out in France. So the end of the 2012 Six Nations, I think it was out there, and it was packed. There was like 8,000 people. As I ran out from the change room to do my little warm up, there's a camera in my face like this, and I was like, "What is happening?" I feel like it was mad. It felt like I left the change rooms and gone out into this alternate universe where it was just. It was crazy, and like the French fans, like I would love to have them behind me because they're so vocal and just they're brilliant, and not at all abusive or anything like that, but just very for the French and stuff. And I just for me that wasn't a nice experience as going to like local pitches where they were welcome with us.
So, you've sort of touched on this, and I don't think I'm going to get a good answer out of it, because my final question was, what is the song that you perform after a victory or sing all together as a victory after Pontyclun or Cardiff Met? And I was going to ask for a rendition, but now you've said that you don't like to sing, maybe not.
Well, hang on a second. I love to sing, but I can't sing. That's the problem. I think if you asked absolutely any of the Falcons girls, they would turn around and say, "It's Celine Dion, it's all coming back to me."
So all done from Cynefon, yeah? That was a song.
Basically, yeah.
It's on loop. That is brilliant. Honestly, I've loved doing this interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, and I will update my facts because that's something I need to do, clearly. Thank you so much, Lisa, and all the best to Pontyclun for the rest of the season. Cardiff Met, are there any more games for Cardiff Met at all this season?
We've got a Sevens Championship now on the 27th of April, and then we'll be done.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on. It's been brilliant. I love talking rugby, and you guys have been just brilliant with it. So thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming on, and so long from me.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye.